Okay, can you see everyone? Okay, welcome everyone. Is anyone here for the very first time? Especially welcome to you. So this is the Yeshe Norbu Mind Training Center. We're part of an organization called the FPMT, Foundation of the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, which was founded by two great teachers, Lama Yeshe and Lama Sopa, back in the 60s, 70s. Yeah, and our intention is to be, there are all these mental or those physical health centers out there, but there's really not a lot of places where you can try and train your mind and cultivate positive qualities of the mind. So that's what we're trying to do, and we invite teachers here. We try to invite a teacher every month, and then we have a weekly program of different courses, and many of you are attending the Discovering Buddhism course. How many is that? Yeah, so this is what we're doing tonight, and then you go online, yeshenorbu.se, and you check out all the other courses that we have going on. And I promised I'd be brief, so I'll be brief. I just want to do some housekeeping. Turn off your phones. There are 2 toilets at the back. There's an emergency exit over there. There's one exit where you came in. We're also, this is being streamed. So we're streaming live the teachings to Facebook. So that might be good to be aware of. And if anyone does not want to be on the streaming, is there anyone who's concerned? No, but maybe, yeah. Exactly, hide under the chair. Yes, and then I just briefly wanted to say a few words. Venerable Robina has been coming to Stockholm for about 10 years, and she's been really instrumental in this place being here at all. 2 years ago, she really energized me, and especially to get this place started, and really stressing. Yeah, we've been meeting for about almost 10 years and studying and meditating, but now we're trying to scale it up and just reach more people, and we're just extremely happy to have Venerable come back to the center. She's one of the most experienced teachers within our tradition. She was ordained back in '78 and has been just working tirelessly. She's edited a lot of books. Some of them are here. She's been the editor for Mandala magazine. She started what's called the Liberation Prison Project, helping prisoners around the world to work with their minds. And now Venerable she doesn't live anywhere. She just has her, yes. She just has her little carry-on and goes flying and teaches and goes to the next place or all year around. And we're very happy to have her back, and by that I'll stop talking and hand it over. Thank you so much, Venerable, for being here.
Ashog. Okay, see what's happened. Suddenly, a bit loud. Good. Okay. Bit better? Bit less, I think, still. Bit less, I think, still. Okay, good. Okay. So this is the first of, what is it, Kaiser? 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. What are these courses, Kaiser? Yeah, but what are how long are they? I understand that. It's a series of how many classes? Kaiser? 9. 9, okay. So this is the first of 9. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just give an overview of this module. In this series of modules, 14 I think, over a couple of years I think, presenting different points of the Buddhist path. Okay. So there's this way that they package the teachings in Tibet. I mean, Buddhism has been in Tibet since, I don't know, 8th century or something. But in the 14th century, a particular person there's different traditions of Buddhism in Tibet. And so the one that we're involved with here is, the teachings that we're relating to here, his name is called Tsongkhapa. And he had a particular way of presenting all of Buddha's teachings. And as the Dalai Lama said, it's a bit like the education system. So we often don't think of spiritual teachings like that, but you know, maybe philosophical, but for the Buddhists, philosophical and psychological and spiritual all come together. It's just different approaches to the same thing, you know. So what this module is a presentation of the entire path that's covered by the 14 modules actually. So it's a summary of the whole thing. So like I said, as the Dalai Lama said, it's like the education system. So I think, you know, we don't think that way when it comes to even philosophy actually, you know. Grade 1, grade 2 and things like this, but this is really what it is. So this packaging of all of Buddha's teachings, it's a particular presentation that's kind of said to be more experiential. It's not just listening to a whole lot of philosophy. It's all philosophy anyway, but it's presented from the perspective of experiential. It's presented in such a way that we can internalize it and see the experiential application of it. Because that's really fundamental. And I think that's a curious thing, because in our culture, I don't think we think of philosophy as something you practice. I think, in fact, it's the opposite. I think we really have an idea of science you practice, music you practice, but we don't think we practice philosophy. I think we have an idea in the West that philosophy is something very objective, and you don't stick your nose in it. You sort of present these different things, but you step aside and you present them very objectively. And for example, Professor Jeffrey Hopkins, one of the first American Buddhist professors who was actually a practitioner that began in '76, that started one of the kind of Buddhist schools at the University in Virginia, University of, what's it called, I forget, in South Carolina. He said he was looked down upon by his fellow philosophers because he actually practiced it. So I think that's how we tend to think in the Western world. Philosophy is necessarily objective and you don't get involved in it. That's the exact opposite for the Buddha. So Buddhism is actually a philosophy. It's a presentation of the universe. It's a worldview. You can even say it's a science, and that's not being sarcastic. It's a worldview. It's a presentation of the way the world exists. It's also psychology. It's also metaphysics. But also absolutely it's spiritual. And all of it is to be applied. All of it is to be practiced. So in that sense, it's all, and it's education, you know. So the way that Tsongkhapa presents, basically this Tsongkhapa's 14th century. He took as his guide a little text that was written in the 11th century or something by a person called a teacher, this Indian master, scholar, yogi, saint, whatever, who spent the last 15 years of his life in Tibet. And he came along and he saw that Buddhism had been in Tibet since the 8th century, but they kind of lost the plot a little bit, he thought. So he kind of took all the essential points from this vast body of knowledge of Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist psychology and philosophy that had been existing since 2,000 years, at that point 1,500 years in India, coming from the amazing system of philosophy and metaphysics and psychology and spiritual practice of the Hindus before that, you know. So what our teacher did was take the essential points from that vast body of knowledge and presented these essential points from this point of view of its being experiential. And indeed, also from the point of view of incremental, one step at a time, gradual, like you would learn anything. Because the point is, for all this information, this philosophy, this view, Buddha's view of the universe, is to be internalized. Actually, what a Buddhist isn't just a person who sits there with their eyes closed, watching their navel or something. There's something special happening, which is we have these, the cliched views we have of what a Buddhist is, or indeed of spiritual practice. But actually a Buddhist is a person who internalizes Buddha's own experiential findings, his philosophy, in other words, about the way the universe is, about what happiness is, what suffering is, what a sentient being is, what is the mind, how do things function. This is what Buddhism is. It's this vast philosophical view, and it's vastly dealt with in the literature. So a teacher took this and presented it in this orderly experiential way, orderly according to the level of the capacity of the student, which is a grand way of saying junior school, high school, university, and postgraduate. I mean, in fact, even the terms, they even divide, it's divided. The term in Tibetan is called lamrim, path gradual, you know. So I don't know what words you use for school in Sweden, but certainly in English, this is very, very convenient because we talk about grade 1. You enter at grade 1. It's called junior school. You go from grade 1 to whatever. Then you go to high school and you go through grade this, grade that, eventually to university, and then you do postgraduate. And then you graduate. You know, you graduate. So the word gradual is a perfect word. Lamrim, gradual path. Well, a word that I think would be more makes more sense to us, because we don't use the term, oh, I'm doing a gradual path of music. We don't talk like that. What are you doing these days? Oh, I've entered into a gradual path studying physics. No, we don't say that. We say we're doing a course. I'm doing a university course. It could be a year, it could be 5 years. So a course is actually the meaning of the word gradual path, because that's literally what it is. And as soon as we hear the word course, we understand that. It's incremental, it's gradual, it's experiential, because you're internalizing it. So this lamrim is a presentation, and Discovering Buddhism, this 14 modules, this 3 whatever course, is taking these main points presented in this package, starting with Tsongkhapa in the 14th century, coming from a teacher in the 11th century, but presented in such a way that it's more palatable to us modern people, because, you know, we have a different style, different approach. The same components are there. So this third module is really a presentation of the whole thing, a summary of the whole thing, which I'm supposed to present tonight. Just as well I talk fast. So anyway, okay, so as the Dalai Lama said, it's like the education system. That's what the lamrim means. So the traditional terminology, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for example, our teacher, the boss of our organization, he translates very appropriately, very correctly, the way that they speak in the lineage. You know, they respect the lineage. So he would translate the first section of the teachings as that we might call junior school. This is a correct translation of the Tibetan terminology, and you can see how arcane it is. He would call it the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Well, junior schools are easier to digest, isn't it? The teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Then you've got the middle, and they call that the lowest scope. Scope is a good word, the scope of the disciple, you know. Then you go to the next level, and that clearly is high school, and guess what? It's the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability. And then you go to university, and that's the great capability. And then you've got postgraduate. So I like those concepts, because as soon as we hear them, we get it. It's earlier stuff, middle stuff, more advanced stuff. And we know indeed in any course of any material, you don't enter at university level unless you're really smart, you know, and have already internalized something and can get it at that point. You start at the beginning. You start at junior school. It's pretty obvious. But like I said, it's really surprising to us, I think, to think that a series of spiritual teachings is incremental, is experiential, is like education system, junior school, high school. That I think is surprising to us. If we think of spiritual teachings, we think it's kind of one big glob of interesting things, and mostly we think about it as compassion. So what's curious here is that compassion is university. There's an analogy that I love to use all the time, and it fits this entire junior school, high school model. Structure, you know, and it's there's a saying in Buddhism that a bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. Well, speaking really simply, the wisdom wing is junior school and high school, and then university, that's the compassion wing, and then you've got the postgraduate at the end, you know. That's the teachings of Vajrayana, Tantrayana. So Okay, so the essence of everything, so what you're trying to do, what are you doing in this course? How do you graduate? What will you graduate as if you enter into this Lam Rim? If you enter into this course, you'll graduate as a Buddha. You'll graduate as a Buddha. That's the point. I mean, not after 9 weeks. Well, you might. If you're clever enough, you might. But the point is, fully internalizing, seriously internalizing in the long term, all the information that you're going to be hearing is the information, the teachings that you then, the philosophical views that you then utilize and internalize and meditate upon until eventually you've internalized it all and completed it. When you've totally done that, that could be, 9 lifetimes, perhaps, forget about 9 weeks. But it's presenting the entire path from A to Z. And the result is Buddha. So what's Buddha? Well, like I mentioned last night, this Tibetan word, the equivalent, sangye, it's very tasty. The etymology of this is very tasty. And this is telling us, when we understand this word, it implies the approach. It implies the practice. It implies what we're trying to accomplish. So the end result is sangye, Buddha. Sang implies, we said last night, the utter eradication from one's own mind of all neuroses, all ego, all delusions, all nonsense, all the fears and dramas and depression and anxiety and whatever words we want for them. And the second syllable, gye, implies, and that's the wisdom wing. Roughly speaking, that's the accomplishment of the wisdom wing. And then you've got the compassion wing, and that's the accomplishment of the second syllable. It's implied by the second syllable, gye, sangye, Buddha. Gye implies the development to perfection of all the goodness, all the virtues, which is accomplished in the compassion wing. Speaking very loosely, okay? So if we're going to graduate in this course, eventually, actually graduate, not to study it, but actually internalize it and become a Buddha, and then so that if the job then is to rid the mind of all the rubbish and grow all the goodness in the mind, then clearly the job we're doing as a Buddhist is in the mind, and the part of us that does the job is the mind. And so the wisdom wing is the ridding the mind of all the rubbish. So in order to do that, so that job is really done in high school. That job really, the actual job of, as we talked last night, of being your own therapist, knowing your mind intimately, understanding Buddhist model of the mind, which is studied in the high school part. That's part of this, practicing the path module. And it's taught, I think, in the first module, isn't it? The nature of the mind, isn't it? The first one is the nature of mind, isn't it? And that actually is really more like high school. But that's very tasty for us for us contemporary people, I think, to study that first. But actually, the first level of practice, junior school entry level, don't even discuss the mind yet. So we've got to understand this, and this is the Buddhist approach. We also happen to have body and speech, don't we? And Buddhism talks very much about we've got body, speech, and mind. And we can see that we've got body and speech. Another way to say that we have behavior. We're very social beings. We live together. And we can see that naughty behavior, bad behavior, is what causes us to be miserable and what makes a mess of our relationships and indeed makes a mess of the world. Look at the world. So it's obvious. We don't talk like this in our culture, but it's a very key point in Buddhism. Basically the body and speech are just the servants of the mind. For the Buddha, the mind is the point. Tibetan's point here. Our consciousness, our mind is the point. What goes on in our mind. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. That's when you really become a Buddhist. When you start to understand and unpack and unravel and fundamentally reconfigure the contents of your own mind. This is how we talked last night. This is actually high school, and that's where you become an actual Buddhist. That's where you do what is unique to the Buddhist approach. Buddha's approach to the mind is unique. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but it's quite specific, and not how we think in the materialist world. He's not discussing the brain. And as I said yesterday, it's coming from these amazing genius Indians well before the Buddha. So junior school work then is about body and speech. So why? Well, Buddha's whole point is, if the goal is to rid the mind of all the rubbish, ego and fears and dramas, there has to be an assumption that we have them. Otherwise, why would he bother giving us a method to get rid of them? So there's an assumption we've got them. And that's the work we do in high school. That's the real work. So the gye is to rid the mind of all the rubbish. So that implies we've got the rubbish. So this is the point here. The body and speech are merely the servants of all the dramas in here. They're also the servants of the love and the compassion and the kindness and the goodness. So when we go in the middle, we'll discuss the middle scope. We'll do that, high school, but just giving a context here. When we look at the model of the mind, and as we discussed last night, that Buddha divides all the contents of our mind, countless thousands of different states of mind, and they're really precise in the way they describe each one. Buddha divides all of these states of mind of our mental consciousness into three categories: the neurotic ones, the valid ones, the virtuous ones, and then the mechanics of the mind. I like to call them that: concentration, mindfulness, many of these states of mind that we must cultivate that enable us to do the job of distinguishing between the neuroses and the goodness, which are mixed together like a big soup right now. That's the actual heart job of being a Buddhist, and that's done in high school. But we're not ready for it, basically. Why? Because we can see, if we look at the world, forget yourself, we're out of control. There's no discipline. We vomit out whatever we think we feel out our mouth. We jump onto any person if we like intersex. We jump onto any body that we feel like. We grab any piece of cake into our mouth when we want to. There's zero control. We have zero discipline. So of course we get nervous when we hear this because it sounds like kind of religion, you know. You're not allowed to enjoy sex, drugs and rock and roll, not to mention chocolate cake. But this is not your Buddhist approach. The Buddha's point is, when it comes to the mind, is, as he's implying in the end result, we can rid the mind of all the delusions and the neuroses. And why should we do that? Because he has found from his own experience that they are the cause of all suffering. So given that we want to be rid of suffering and we want to develop happiness, and this is another way of framing all of Buddhism, it is metaphysics, it is psychology, it is philosophy, and it is definitely a system of ethics. And they all come to the same thing. So we want to rid the mind of all the rubbish because Buddha has found from his own direct experience that this stuff is adventitious, as they say. It is not integral to who we are. It is not at the core of our being. It is not oneness with our mind. This is a massively important point. So therefore, and the goodness within us is integral to who we are, is who we really are, and can be developed to perfection. Buddha. So if that's the actual job done in high school, the wisdom part, speaking very loosely, and then we perfected all the goodness in the compassion wing. The first wing, the first stage, junior school, is like preliminary. Buddha says, well, listen, you guys, you're completely driven by all the crazy states of mind right now. You're out of control. You've got no control over your mouth, no control over your behavior. So you're causing yourself complete suffering, not to mention harming others. So to begin to do the actual job of being a Buddhist, which is high school, to be your own therapist, you've got to control your body and speech first. I mean, it's fairly evident. It's kind of obvious, really. If you've got a problem with attachment to chocolate cake, something as boring as that, you know, you just leap upon it as soon as you see it. There's no control. Oh, well, what happened? Where did I eat that cake? Where's it gone? We all know that because we have no control. So we have to learn to harness our physical energy first. So junior school, all about behavior. So in the presentation of this lamb rim, this presenting the path, there are a series of steps in each of these. Junior school has got a series of kind of things we need to think about, listen to, all of Buddha's philosophy, and then to internalize. And each leads to the next. But the essence of junior school, the culmination of junior school, is the understanding of Buddha's view about happiness and suffering and the causes of it. And that's this view of karma. So that's the essence of junior school, is abiding by the laws of karma. It's the culmination. There are several points that lead to it, and I'm going to go through the points. Just touch on each of these points. But the culmination and the essence of junior school is abiding by the laws of karma. Control your body and control your speech. Why? Because then you will stop harming yourself. And that's the key point. We'll discuss this. Now you're ready to go to high school, where you can begin to control your mind, which is the point. So the high school has got extensive, all the teachings, but the essence of that is being your own therapist. The essence of that is getting to the root of the problem. Buddha's saying we can rid the mind of suffering and its causes. And the causes are the mind. The delusions, they're the main causes. That's dealt with in high school. But junior school, what drives the delusions, the body and speech, that's dealt with by understanding karma. So the essence of junior school is karma. The essence of high school is understanding Buddhist psychology, the Buddhist model of the mind, and distinguishing between the delusions and the virtues. And then the essence of university is cultivating compassion, cultivating bodhicitta, all the various stages that lead to that. And then practicing what's called the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. And then the bodhisattva practitioner would then go on to postgraduate and hasten the end result, their Buddhahood. That's the essence of the path. So the result is Buddhahood. The quickest way to become a Buddha is to practice the Vajrayana, which is postgraduate. To do that, you've got to practice bodhicitta, which is the compassion wing. And to realize emptiness, which is the culmination of the wisdom wing, really. I mean, that's getting complicated now. Then to do that, you've got to have high school, which is dealing with your mind. And to do that, you've got to get to junior school, which is dealing with your body and speech. So it's incremental and logical and one step at a time, progressive. But on the face of it, I mean, when I first heard the Buddhist teachings from Lama Zopa, when I first heard it, the typical presentation of this Lamrim, I was there for 1 month and I did not know what he was talking about. I mean, I heard the words, no problem, but it was the most arcane, abstract, I could not comprehend. I kept saying to myself, where's the Buddhism, you know? I didn't know what Buddhism was. That certainly wasn't what I thought it was. It was so abstract, so arcane. And you know yourselves, if you read a very traditional commentary on the Lamrim, you'll be gobsmacked, you know? So what's the essence of it? Psychological, because it is psychological. So the very first thing, Buddha says, you know, what we've got to think about first, like a little preliminary practice he gets us to do. Now, a teacher, this 11th century author, he cobbled together a whole bunch of points. They love to have lists of things. He got 18 things, and they have these quaint, cute labels for them. So these 18 things are the 10 freedoms and 8 richnesses. Never mind. It's 18 little things, 18 things that we have to contemplate. Our teacher suggests we contemplate to energize us, to even want to enter into junior school and to start to practice. And so the essence of this very first point in this Lamrim package and this practice of the path is to contemplate how fortunate our lives are. A teacher says if we start to get some energy and realize, wow, we're so fortunate, and it's just really doing market research, it's just really doing a comparison. You know, on the internet sometimes you're going to get those people who look and say there's 1 in 10 million people have a computer and only 1 in 17 people have this, and then you deduce that you're one of those lucky people. Well, a teacher's doing a bit like that. He says there are so many things that if we thought about it and simply compared with other humans on this planet, not to mention animals, which is pretty abstract for us to even think about comparing ourselves with, we're going to realize, wow, we're fortunate. So the simple point is thinking about how fortunate you are. It sounds kind of like goody-goody for us. We think, how boring, you know. It doesn't kind of get us excited. Because we don't think we're fortunate. We think I'm this big kind of lump of me that someone else made and plonked me on this planet, and I'm trying to get happy. So we don't think of ourselves as fortunate. But if we just do this comparison, these different points, these 18 different points, the summary of them, you know, you've got a reasonable health, reasonable sanity, all the limbs are in roughly the right place, you know, your senses are roughly working properly. We've got some place to live. We're not living on the streets, probably. We've got enough money in the bank. We've got some people to support us. We, you know, maybe have a job. I mean, things that we really do utterly actually take for granted, and we know perfectly well is a rare thing on this planet. But we tend to take it for granted, though. So to sincerely think about this, then the logical deduction of feeling like you're fortunate, if you do the comparison, is that, wow, what a tragedy to waste it. How foolish to waste it, you know. So the essence of this first point that Atisha gets us to think about, there's my dinner on my, never mind. To think about how fortunate we are, and I'm not going to go through all the 18 points, I'll leave that to Kaiso. You know, you've got a bunch of good things, you know, like I said before, a few things. You're not completely out of your brain. You're not living in a war zone. You're not living on the streets. You're not completely crazy. People aren't trying to rape you and murder you. You know, I mean, banks give you credit. People smile at you. Things that, you know, we think we should actually notice are true. Then the conclusion is, wow, I'm fortunate. I don't want to waste this. That's the very first step. Atisha gets us to do that. He kind of cobbled together this little contemplation. And the conclusion is, I don't want to waste this precious life. So I think that's really it sounds so simple, but actually it's quite profound. But we don't do this because I think we're so miserable and we're so caught up in sort of feeling like victims and it's not fair and I didn't ask to get born and I don't know, you know, it's someone else's fault and what do you mean I'm fortunate? We always tend to think of all the things we haven't got. So we don't actually even think we're fortunate, but to think about it and logically can prove it by doing some comparison with the rest of the planet, then what a tragedy to waste these circumstances. So that's a little preliminary practice. Then on the basis of this, we think, well, but let's not waste it. What am I going to do? Well, I'll enter into this path. I hear about Mr. Buddha. He says I can become a Buddha. That sounds very nice. I'll enter into that course. I'll do this course, you know. So you enter into junior school grade 1. So the next little thing a teacher gets us to do, he presents, he takes from all of Buddha's vast teachings on what's called impermanence, one of Buddha's major teachings about how things change. He taught to a great extent on what's called subtle impermanence, which is really fascinating. And the teaching here is in arguing with some prevailing views at the time philosophically, because India was a really amazing place philosophically. We know nothing about it in our culture, do we? We know about the Greeks, but not about the Indians. It was rich in the most unbelievable, sophisticated thinkers, amazing systems existing for several thousand years, quite remarkable. Buddha was born in that. So one of his major teachings was contradicting a prevailing view that there are certain phenomena that don't change, Certainly the concept of God, the concept of an Atman, these types of things. So Buddha's teachings are coming from his own experience, how in reality there's nothing that doesn't change in the conventional world that we know. Everything is impermanent. Everything changes moment by moment. So the Buddha's teachings on subtle impermanence are really fascinating. Very intellectual and very fascinating. But a teacher doesn't bother with that. He gets us to talk about what they call gross impermanence, the more evident level of impermanence, that something that comes into being will break or die. Trees come into life, they die. Flowers come and they go. Grapes grow and they go mouldy. Cups get made and they break. But he doesn't even talk about that, because that sounds very interesting and we get it. But he wants to get us, his agenda is to continue to give us this wake-up call. He's given us a wake-up call first, thinking about how precious this life is and energizing us not to waste it. Now he wants us to increase this sense of urgency not to waste this precious life. And that's this entry-level junior school grade 1 contemplation about about impermanence, not just impermanence, but impermanence of me. And that's called death. As soon as we hear that word, we go, huh? We wake up, So that's a teacher's agenda. To think about impermanence, particularly in relation to death. So what is his agenda? He wants us, like I said, he wants to give us a wake-up call, to increase the wake-up call, not to waste this precious life. So this energizes even further, because then we start to think about, Buddha, a teacher presents, and Tsongkhapa presents in 3 points about the things to contemplate about impermanence and death. First, that death is definite. The 2 points are the things to contemplate, and the third point is like the action point, the thing to do as a result. So all of these teachings, they're coming from Buddhist philosophy, but they're presented in such a way that they would become experiential and that energize us, not just have them as an intellectual, interesting bunch of ideas in your head so you pass your philosophy exam. No. A teacher wants us to touch us here. That's the point. It's experiential. So the first point to think about here, to contemplate, to argue with the prevailing view deep in our bones, although we know perfectly well we're going to die, is that death is definite. Yeah, we go, yeah, we know that, Buddha. But he says basically we don't. He says in our mind, deep in our bones, we've got this intense, instinctive belief, in spite of our intellectual knowledge, that somehow I'm not going to die. Somehow I'm not changing. We can't stand change. So we cling to this idea of permanent me. This is one of the deepest delusions in our mind, Buddha says. So by thinking simply and obviously and evidently every day, observing the world, not just, you can do it in formal meditation, and Kai's going to explain that, or you can just do it in your daily life. Get a wake-up call. There's that ant. It was walking along getting breakfast. Boom, it got squashed. There's a monkey. You read every day. Every day we're bombarded by the reality that people who believe like us that they're permanent and suddenly they're dead. The simple point here is to recognize that death is definite. So it won't become a real wake-up call, though, until we realize that it'll be my death. And the whole point is here, it'll be me who will die. There's one little kind of poetic prayer that we sometimes do by Pabongko Rinpoche called the Heart Spoon. It's an experiential text, poem, prayer, aspiration to try and get us to realize impermanence. At the end of each verse, he says, and that'll happen to me. So we can hear about death over there in strangers' countries. We can hear about death in countries that we know. We can hear about death in our own town. We get even closer to home, we can hear about death when it's our own family, but it will never touch us. It won't touch us until we say, that will happen to me. That's the most immediate way to get a realization of the reality that death is definite. That'll happen to me. So the next point that a teacher wants us to get to think about, this Lam Rim, his point in his original text, should scare the life out of us. It's even to increase this wake-up call, to increase this recognition about impermanence, that death might be definite, but the time of death is absolutely not definite. Death can happen at any time. And this is one that we know even intellectually is true, but we do not believe it. We're very convinced that somehow death's a long way off there. Even when you're old, it still feels like you're this real living person every day, you know. As Lama Zopa says, we're so ridiculous. We divide the world into living people and dying people. Think about it. The person you heard about just has told they got cancer. Suddenly they've changed from being an ordinary person to a dying person. We don't know how to talk to them. They're kind of over there. You can't talk about life to dying people. They're not real people. This shows the absurdity of the assumptions we have. And that's really all Buddha and a teacher, indeed, and all the holy beings are trying to get us to do, to question our assumptions, to wake up, to wake up, to wake up to reality, you know. So the conclusion of this first point, junior school entry level grade 1, to increase our sense of urgency, not to waste this precious life. The third point, the action point, is at the time of death, what's important to me? What's of any benefit? So of course we're taking Buddha's view here, and given Buddha's view, which we learn about when we get to high school, that our consciousness did not begin in our mummy's womb, and indeed it will not end at death, given that it's that every millisecond of what I think and do and say, which we learn about at the end of junior school, leaves a seed in my mind that will ripen in the future as my experiences. This is the law of karma. Given that negative seeds ripen as my suffering and positive seeds ripen as my happiness, and finally, given that, hey, guess what, I don't want suffering and I do want happiness, then it is logical to deduce that the only thing at the time of death that is of any benefit to me is my virtuous karmic imprints. So this is kind of leaping ahead a bit here, because we don't hear about karma until 5 points along in junior school. We're still at entry level first junior school, grade 1. But this 3 points about death are the essence of what we should internalize. And the bottom line is, the conclusion here is, wow, I really better not waste this precious life. On the basis of knowing that if I don't do something about it, suffering could ripen, and I don't want suffering. Thank you very much. So then we think, well, you know, then the next step, and this is very abstract and arcane and bizarre to us in our modern world, the next step our teacher gets us to think about in this junior school level, to increase our sense of urgency, that's a teacher's agenda, is to now think of the likely possibilities of types of rebirth. So we've got to remember, you know, that India for thousands of years, rebirth, reincarnation and karma are like, for us, science. That's just their view. Tibetans, it's completely been implicit from them for 1,200 years. The view in Asia, coming from India, was just the way the world was. It wasn't some odd, weird, hippie idea to them. Materialism is a weird, hippie idea to them, you know. So the view of karma and reincarnation was kind of completely prevailed across India for thousands of years, and indeed went straight to Tibet. So here, this third point to contemplate in junior school, to continue to increase our sense of urgency, is to contemplate the type of suffering, types of rebirth that could come at the time of death, which I have no idea when it's going to happen. You know, could be today, could be tomorrow, whatever. So then here, in the Lam Rim text, and the teachings give these descriptions of the type of sufferings that are likely to be, that could be a possibility. So that from here, one increases one wish. One even further has a sense of urgency. By this point, we're really kind of, wow, I better get on with it here. I don't want to waste this precious life. It could end at any moment. God knows what kind of rebirth I could get. Good heavens, whom can I turn to give me some methods to stop this disaster, you know? The next step in junior school is now we turn to Buddha for refuge. So we learn about the Buddha here. We learn about what the Buddha, his teachings, blah, 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 and what you rely upon. And then you get to karma. That's the culmination of junior school, and that's the essence of junior school practice. All of these points lead up to it, incrementally and logically and psychologically. Now we begin to put our money where our mouth is. Now we begin to actually practice. And that's, we learn about the law of karma. This view that prevailed in the whole of India and Tibet was the default view of the universe, obviously various variations of it, This is fundamental. This is the vast view of the Buddha of the universe, of how it comes into being. And the literature is huge on this. Like I joke and say it wasn't the hippies who made it up in the 60s, you know. It's a worldview, vast worldview. And the literature, enormous, huge. So we learn about the law of karma. That every millisecond of what I think and do and say necessarily leaves seeds in my mind, necessarily, like all seeds, will ripen in the future as my experiences. This takes a while to hear, because the two views we mostly are familiar with on our planet, isn't it? Either your mother and father made you, which is materialism, which is the default mode we all assume, or a creator made you. And in both cases, those two philosophical positions share one point. You are the handiwork of someone else. Well, that's the weirdest idea for the Buddha. No such concept. And this takes a while for us to hear, because we only know that view. You believe your mother created you, or you believe God created you. There's no other option. Well, Buddha's got a third option. And it's we created ourselves. It's self-creation, as the Dalai Lama said. This really takes time. Of course, this is based on the logic, the Buddhist view, that your consciousness is not physical. And it didn't begin in your mother's womb, which you learn more about in high school, which is assumed here it's taught in the karmic teachings. So the essence of all the junior school, where you finally put your money where your mouth is, you abide by the laws of karma. So what does that mean? You stop doing negative actions. The Buddha gives a little checklist of 10 don'ts. The first 7 are about the body and speech. And he suggests we don't kill, that we don't steal, and we don't jump on the wrong partner. 3 of the body. Then 4 of the speech, and that's us humans, isn't it? He suggests he exhorts us to not lie, not use harsh language, not to badmouth people behind their backs, and not to rabbit on about nothing. The last 3 are the beginning, I always put it this way, sort of the beginnings of working on our mind, which we really get into deeply in high school. But here, Buddha exhorts us to kind of at least begin to get some semblance of control over the grosser levels of the 3 main delusions. Control kind of the grossest level of craving, at least attempt to control kind of the grossest level of anger, which is this very disturbed state of mind that wants people to suffer, and the grossest level of ignorance, kind of fundamentalism, narrow-mindedness, you know. So the Buddha gives a little set of instructions. But the crucial point here, and we learn about that when we learn about Buddha, just before we get to karma, Buddha is not a creator. There's a fundamental point that's really important, not just some vague idea, but is necessary to understand. Buddha was this regular guy, like you and me, you know, with delusions and neuroses, and who did this work. Went as far as he could go in the Indian system, and then went further. Hence we have Buddhism. And he went in, as the Dalai Lama said, I always quote this, read a few years ago, that was these amazing Indians, more than 3,000 years ago, who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Well, Buddha went through that system as far as he could go, and then he went further, in relation, in particular, to his own findings about the nature of self. So Buddha's not a creator. Therefore, it's not merely... The approach in Buddhism has got nothing to do with merely believing, which is appropriate if you believe in a creator, because you're not supposed to... You don't prove the creator right. That would be the supreme arrogance. You must have faith in a creator. By definition, a creator is superior. The Buddha doesn't have that view. A Buddha is a superior being, and we can all become one, he says. So this view is very different. So Buddha is this regular guy who did the hard work and accomplished Buddhahood. So this is who Buddha is, and you learn that in the part before karma. So this is Buddha's findings, this natural law called karma. It runs the show. There's no creator. It's not punishment. It's not reward, because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. But it takes a while to hear this, because we hear about karma, and it just sounds like another version of punishment, you know. Instead of God, it's karma. But that's not at all how Buddha talks. So here the essence of junior school practice, as I said, led up to by these various points, to energize us to want to abide by the laws of karma. Here we really start to seriously practice. Given the view that my mind will continue after I die, given that I don't want suffering, and given the long-term goal, remember, that I've got the potential to rid my mind of the causes of suffering. So there are 2 main causes of suffering we learn in karma. We mainly learn this, the actions I do with my body and speech, and the delusion that impels them. So here we just learn to control the body and speech. There's no discussion much about controlling the mind. Just control your behaviour. Do not kill. Do not lie. Don't jump on the wrong partner. Harness your crazy verbal and physical energy. Now, the crucial point here too is, and we learn that when we learn about the Buddha, why should we do that? Why should I follow Buddha's instructions? If I'm a Christian, I must do it because God's the boss. And God will punish me if I don't. But here the Buddha is not a punisher, so why should I follow his instructions? Because I've thought about him in the previous point, about the Buddha and all that, and I have decided I like his advice. I've decided, I'm in charge, not Buddha, I'm in charge. I've decided I like Buddha's advice, so I have decided, like the doctor when she says, don't smoke, Robina, you might get cancer. I don't do it because she's going to punish me with cancer. That's bizarre. Buddha's like that. He's giving, based on his own experience, he has found it to be so that doing negative actions will ripen in the future as one's own suffering. And so, yes, I have faith in my doctor for now until I learn it myself. So abiding by the laws of karma is the essence of the first kind. And we are the beneficiary. This has got zero to do with compassion yet. This is all for my sake. Junior school is totally for my sake. I've got to have some self-respect when I know I'm sick of suffering, so I'm going to stop creating the causes of suffering. So if we got this far, if we graduated at high school, you'd have a good life, you'd control your body, speech and mind, you'd create lots of virtue, you'd purify your mind. When you die, you get another decent human rebirth, and you'll keep on bopping. But we don't want to graduate at high school or junior school, we want to go to high school. So we now go to high school. So the essence of high school is now we get to the root of the problem, which is the delusions. And if we're going to graduate at high school, we would complete the path there. We'd learn about suffering, we'd learn about the Four Noble Truths, the causes of suffering, we'd understand all the delusions, how they function, how they're distinguished from virtues, we'd get to the root of the problem, understand the root delusion, we'd realise emptiness, and we'd get the hell out of here. We'd achieve our own nirvana, and we'd say we're gone, bye, out of here, baby. Then you've graduated at high school. But here, we're not going to graduate at high school because we're on the Mahayana path. We're going to go on to university. But the work we do is the same. We understand the Four Noble Truths, what suffering is, what the causes are, that we can be free of it, and how to do it. We learn about here. We learn now more deeply about the mind, which is the root of the problem. And that we learn to control the body and speech first. Now we get to the mind. That's the essence of the high school teachings, understanding the delusions. And this is where we get to the unique approach to Buddha's view of the mind, which is so distinct, so distinct to the Buddha. The words of the contents we all know: love, compassion, hate, jealousy. We know these words. They're so cute. But Buddha's take on these states of mind is very, very distinct to the Buddha. We talked about last night. We're not discussing the brain. You ask some of these amazing Hindu yogis, forget the Buddhist yogis, way back then, who, where their brain was. They wouldn't have a clue. They didn't study the brain, but they studied the mind. And this is what I said yesterday. And again, this is very suspect for us in our modern world. Even philosophy is suspect if you practice it. But, to actually think that you can trust your mind enough to completely transform it, in other words, to be a totally internalized person, that's a big shock to us. We don't really trust psychology at all. But Buddhist psychology is so precise, so subtle, so exact in its description of the contents of the mind. And these genius Indians before the Buddha, they're the ones who created single point of concentration. This is what we're going to really start doing in high school, where you learn to now get some concentration, because you've got to get some, so you can step out of your crazy chaos in here, so you can start to unpack and unravel the contents, so you can start to lessen the delusions. And again, you're the beneficiary. This is all high school and junior school. We are the beneficiary. This is for our benefit. This is the method we use for us to become this marvelous, subdued, disciplined, wise, fulfilled, content person. Not discussing compassion yet. That comes university level. So here we really focus on the mind. Understanding the causes of suffering. And this is why I said before, Buddha's view of all the contents of the mind. He talks about the neurotic, deluded, or as they call it in the literature, afflictions, the neurotic states of mind, the afflicted emotions, the neurotic emotions, which we in our modern world totally assume are normal and are part of a normal person, and that you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. No, Buddha's way more radical. He has found that they are not at the core of our being and can be removed. Pretty amazing. And these we have to identify. So what the conclusion then from high school, and I've just touched on it, is what they call renunciation. Junior school and high school, it's renunciation. And renunciation means you giving up something. So what are you giving up? You're giving up suffering and its causes. Not happiness. not pleasure. No, suffering and its causes. That's the conclusion here. On the Mahayana path, that's the level, the first level, major realization that we get from these two levels of practice, junior school and high school. Renunciation of suffering and its causes. The grosser level of suffering, which is created by our body and, the body and speech, and then the subtle level of suffering, which is the first one, the delusions that inform our behavior. We begin to completely harness this. We're really on a roll now, become this marvelous person. And if you, like I said, if you graduated high school, you'd also realize emptiness and you'd get out of here and achieve your own nirvana and you wouldn't come back. But you can go further. You can go to university. Go to the compassion wing. Because now we start to look around and we go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. So now we practice the various techniques that culminate in the first stage of this compassion wing. Is the culmination of this first level is called bodhicitta. This outrageous state of mind that's the result, the culmination of extraordinary levels of love and compassion. So there's here the two techniques, in the literature they talk about there's two techniques, the 6 causes and 1 effect, and another one, the more radical series of techniques, and these little techniques that have been presented over the centuries, coming back right to Atisha, and before that to the great Nalanda monastery, 8th century in India, which is sort of where all of our great masters come from, whose teachings whose texts we use as the basis of all our studies in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university system. We learn these techniques that have been passed on generation after generation, these marvelous simple little series of techniques that culminate in this extraordinary state of mind, this paradigm shift where no longer is self important, now others are more important. And even just these words are so shocking. I mean, I have such reluctance to talk about the compassion wing because the level of compassion that Buddha says we can accomplish is really quite shocking, quite beyond the normal way we would tend to think in our culture, quite shocking. So the essence of this first stages of realizations is known as bodhicitta. Then after that, we then perfect the path by practicing the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. The first 4 are the perfecting of the compassion wing, and this is over many lifetimes. And the last 2 are the perfecting of the wisdom wing, where we have concentration meditation and emptiness. These, if you're practicing the Hinayana path only, which is another way of saying you graduated high school, you practice concentration and you realize emptiness in high school. But here they're put aside, not that you don't practice them, and they're taught in the university level. They're taught at the level of the bodhisattva path. And they're the last 2 perfections. And then you become a Buddha. So the one series of techniques that taught that is a combination of these 2 6 causes and 1 effect, it's called, and the other one's called exchanging self for others. This more radical approach to accomplishing love and compassion and all the virtues. But there's another way, 11 little techniques, a way of presenting these 2 together that culminate in bodhicitta. So the whole approach of the first level of practice is like playing safe. And in when you go to refuge, the 4th part, before you get to karma, you learn about the Buddha and refuge. You learn about when you formalize your refuge in the Buddha, and you even can learn to take vows and these things. The level of junior school and high school is like playing safe. And there are sets of vows that you take that are related to that level of practice. There's 3 levels of vows related to the 3 levels of practice. The first level, junior school and high school, are the vows of individual liberation, such that these are the ones of harnessing your own body and speech, because vows are always only about behavior, not about the mind, where you're controlling your body and speech purely for your benefit. You're playing safe. You don't kill, you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't this, you don't that. You are the beneficiary. Now you go to the next level, more outrageous, the compassion wing. Now your whole approach changes. Now the main point, and this is expressed in the vows of a bodhisattva, your main purpose now is to do what is best for others. But you can't, it's logical, that's why compassion is more advanced. How can you do what's best for others if you don't even know yourself? If you're full of misery and self-pity and pathetic, you can't help a fly, So the wisdom wing is where you put yourself together. You're the beneficiary. Now, having more space, having more control, having more renunciation, I can now realize everybody's in the same boat. And so we do these amazing practices, starting with one called equanimity, which I'll talk about, and then going step by step, gradual, culminating in the 11th one, which is called bodhicitta. So the first of these, the foundation practice, is called equanimity. There's many ways that Buddhism uses that term. In high school and junior school, you develop equanimity, but it's referring there to equanimity within yourself, having more of a balanced, disciplined state of mind. Now, not berserk up and down like yo-yos, you know. Here, equanimity is in relation to sentient beings. And it's a really crucial thing to understand. Given that on the compassion wing, we are now trying to cultivate this outrageous bodhicitta, to make this paradigm shift where we now only cherish others. As abstract as that does sound to us, all sentient beings it means. So bodhicitta's got, this is the final result of compassion wing, of the first stages of compassion wing. Bodhicitta means awakening, technically it's awakening thought. But it's referring to this outrageous aspiration. One, that your job description is to help others. It's just naturally who you are. There's no longer a second thought. It is utterly spontaneous. Whatever sentient being is there, the ant, the dog, the enemy, the pedophile, who cares? Your job is to help them, based on the wisdom you've got from the wisdom wing. And this is why compassion and love in Buddhism is not some sentimental gooey thing. It's very profound. It's got a lot of wisdom in it. Compassion is not enough, as His Holiness says. It's got to have wisdom. It's not how we think in our culture. It's very powerful compassion, based on what's best for that person. That's the whole approach of bodhicitta, what's best for others. And you now only wish to benefit others, the first component of bodhicitta. The second one is now your long-term goal, that you're going to never give up. You've got this fierce determination, no matter how many lifetimes it takes, you're going to never give up until you finally accomplish the goal of Buddhahood. Because then you're qualified to perfectly help sentient beings. So this bodhicitta is outrageous, you know. It's outrageous. There's no equivalent, anything remotely like it in modern psychology. So the first step in this equanimity, and that comes from this astonishing level of love and compassion. And they even call them great compassion, mahakaruna. So love and compassion are like the essence of all the good qualities that we're trying to cultivate here in the compassion wing. Love is a thought. Start with a thought. When you see someone happy, you delight in their happiness. You're happy for them. That's love. And compassion, you see their suffering and you empathize with it and you wish they didn't have it. So we're trying to grow these two to a limitless degree. And they get to even a level that's called great love. They say, I think, great compassion. So what's that? And it's not just some kind of nice term, it's very specific attitude. And this is the unique compassion of the Bodhisattva. And equanimity starts. I'm going to tell you about equanimity. That's the first step, that's the foundation. But when we understand what we're trying to cultivate, this infinite love and compassion for all beings, then equanimity makes sense. And I'll get to it in a minute. So what love and compassion, this huge level of it, this unique characteristic of the compassion, the great compassion, for example, of the Bodhisattva, it's quite specific. So compassion is already amazing. Oh my God, look at that suffering. That's unbearable. That's compassion, empathy. But the next one is the fierce sense of responsibility of the Bodhisattva. That it's so naturally, the next level of compassion is, what can I do to help? It's a fierce sense of responsibility, like it's your job description. So that's got to be cultivated. And that's a unique characteristic of the Bodhisattva path, you know, of the compassion of the Bodhisattva. So when you're on the Hinayana path, the Theravadan path, the first stages, junior school and high school, which are the same teachings in Burma, in Thailand, there's different interpretations of things, like emptiness, but essentially they're all the teachings of the Buddha, shared by all Buddhists on the planet. So if you graduate at high school, which is the Hinayana path, you achieve your own liberation, your own nirvana. Think about it. What kind of person would you be? You would have given up delusions. You've realized emptiness. You've got no longer a sense of a neurotic I. You've no attachment, jealousy, anger, despair, rubbish, nonsense. You're this blissful, amazing, radiant being. Don't underestimate. And which naturally means you have love and compassion. Bucket loads of it for sentient beings. But the difference between that love and compassion and the compassion of the Bodhisattva is very specific. So for life after life after life, if you're on the Hinayana path, junior school and high school, your goal is to get the hell out of here as quick as possible. And that's called renunciation. That's amazing. Achieve your own liberation. So That's your motivation, programmed in your mind for countless lives. So as you progress, you get less neurotic, more loving, more compassionate. You're an amazing being. And you have so eventually, in one lifetime or other, you achieve your liberation. You no longer need to be reborn. So now what happens? You've got this infinite compassion and love, no doubt. Infinite bliss, no question. But your goal, so when at the time of death, your goal of getting out of samsara, achieving nirvana, overrides your compassion, and you don't come back. But if you're on the Mahayana path, same stages of development, no difference. But your goal is, I must benefit others. You've got bodhicitta, you're trying to practice bodhicitta. You've got great compassion. It's my job. So when you, at a certain point in your progress as well, don't need to come back. But this case, your compassion, your great compassion, it's my job to help. That overrides your bliss, and you come back again, even if you don't need to. That's the unique one of the great compassion of the bodhisattva. It's a huge one, and it's a brave attitude. They talk about the brave attitude of the bodhisattvas to cultivate this great compassion, a sense of responsibility. It's my job, you know. It's my job. It's like a job description. It's my job. A parent has that. You don't have to tell a mother what her job is. A kid's drowning, and she's got compassion. Of course she has, but she's not looking around wondering who's going to save her baby. Even if she can't swim, she's in that water because she knows it's her job description. That's the bodhisattva. They never for one second forget that their job is to benefit sentient beings. So on understanding love and compassion then, wanting others to be happy, wanting them not to suffer, then we understand why we have to have equanimity. This is the foundation. Very specific. So equanimity is, once you accomplish it, what it would be this heartfelt recognition, this is the first of the 11 in the compassion wing, would be this heartfelt recognition that friends, objects of attachment, enemies, objects of aversion, and strangers, objects of indifference and ignorance, and there's no fourth category on this planet, they are equal to each other from one point of view. They each want to be happy, and they each don't want to suffer. That specifically is equanimity. You know? So why do we want to get that? Very logically, because right now, being driven by attachment, we only love those whom we're attached to. We're only attached to those we love. Love and attachment, as far as we're concerned, we conflate them. But they are profoundly and utterly different states of mind. But it demands enormous rigor and work in high school to even begin to distinguish them, you know. So right now, we do have compassion, we do have love, but it's only for one small group of people, and that group keeps changing. You know, when my beloved Martin leaves me for someone else, my love will turn off like a tap. Because it's based on attachment right now. As Lama Zopa says, it's unstable. We do have love and compassion, but it's based on attachment. So here, what we're trying to do is get equanimity, which is we have to get ourselves out of the equation, and we do all these analysis in meditation using logic to argue with ego's misconceptions. That in reality, the person who is the person who you know, the label person I label friend, who does what my attachment wants, the person I label enemy, who doesn't do what my attachment wants, and the person I label stranger, who does neither. They're the three I see all the time. The whole universe is like this. Everybody on this planet has their friends, enemies, and strangers. And we never question these assumptions. This is exactly what we're doing here in equanimity. And there's no basis in logic whatsoever. All we're trying to prove here in equanimity is that, you know, as our mothers would say, put yourself in their shoes. That the person labelled friend, and the person labelled enemy, and the person labelled stranger, they're my labels. They're my pictures I dump on those three people. But from their point of view, these three people, it's really clear. They are identical to each other. They don't want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. They don't want to be happy. That's the bottom line here. That's equanimity. Very specific. So when I start to see that with equanimity, that's the basis now of my wanting to develop love and compassion for everybody. Instead of I want Martin to be happy, which is love, because he makes me happy. No, the logic changes. We're changing the logic. And don't ever think you don't use logic. when you talk about love and compassion. That's what big mistake we make. We get very, very emotional, kind of sentimental. We've got to use logic all the way through, because Buddha's saying all these delusions in us are lying load of maniac nonsense that are not in touch with reality. So all of them need clear logic to argue with them, so we can begin to stretch ourselves to go beyond the nonsense that we live in right now, believing in all ego's stupid voices, you know. So equanimity is the starting point. Upon this, we then grow it gradually until it eventually culminates in love, compassion, great compassion, and then eventually bodhicitta. And then we do the 6 perfections. Continue to work with sentient beings, bopping around from life after life after life, practicing generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance, and then in our meditation, perfecting the wisdom wing by doing concentration meditation, realizing emptiness. And we come all the 6 of these. The combination of these 6 is Buddhahood. And then hastened a bit by your Vajrayana, postgraduate. That's the whole path. So now ask me some questions. Did I miss anything, Kaiser? Did I miss anything? Okay, good. Okay, so any questions, people? If you've never heard all this stuff before, it might sound like ridiculous. I agree with you, but what can we say? Any questions at all? Go, darling.
Yes, I have a question about personality, talent, skills.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so you could develop these in high school, or you can have an intention, how can I best benefit other beings, and what do I have? So could you say that?
Okay, well in high school you wouldn't be thinking about how to benefit others. That's university. In the high school, your main emphasis, on the basis of controlling your body and speech in junior school, you now learn a bit of concentration meditation, you learn Buddhist model of the mind, you begin first theoretically knowing the distinction between a weed and a herb, and now you start applying it in here, watching your mind like a hawk every day, learning to distinguish attachment from love, compassion, jealousy, all the dramas. You really do become your own therapist. This is the main job in high school, really playing safe, recognizing the delusions, seeing how they cause you suffering and how they suffocate your virtues. There's no discussion technically in high school of helping others yet. Do you understand?
Yeah.
But if you want to go to compassion wing, add that to it, because they all fit together. Then clearly, when we can learn to distinguish, and again I keep saying this is the distinct approach in Buddhism, this view of describing some states of mind as deluded, distorted, neurotic, and no basis in no validity, which sounds very shocking to us because we think all states of mind sort of are valid, you know. Then we're going to see they're the ones that are the source of our suffering. And we're going to see when we understand attachment especially is what we have to understand. That's the key to getting renunciation. Then we're going to understand that it's utterly I-based, utterly self-centered. But it's very, very, very hard to see it because it comes along mixed with kindness and love and generosity. And let's say you're a musician and you're completely attached to music. Of course you are, but you're brilliant at music. So if you've got a lot of attachment plus anger plus self-centeredness, your music will just be poison because it'll just be used for your own ego and you won't be helping others. But at the same time, the Bodhisattva approach would be you can still have music and it can be used to help others. And the key is to distinguish is to add to the mind the wish to help others. That's what you get from the compassion wing. That you're using your skills, you use your goodness, you use your accountancy skills, you're this skill, you're that skill, not just to get a good job, not just to get pay, but you now think I'm also going to do things to help others. That's possible. That's absolutely set, and that's why so-called right livelihood. I mean, you can, it's going to be hard to use your ability to make a good gun to help others, isn't it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's got to be, you've got to choose the thing you do use to be of benefit to others. You add that to the mix, and that makes it useful then. That's the really key in the compassion wing. The key, junior school is controlling your body and speech. High school is learning to know all the delusions, in particular attachment, how that is the source of so much pain. And then in university, the essence is to try and change our motivation into the wish to help others, adding that on top of what we do. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Thank you.
And all of that demands some really good introspective skills, which comes from learning meditation, learning concentration, and having a good understanding of these different states of mind and how they function, so we can identify them inside. Do you understand? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Someone else? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. You talked about that anger was a thought.
All the emotions, in Buddha's view of understanding the mind, all the things we call emotions, which is how we feel, and when the body's involved, and the drama, and the mouth, and the tears, and the, you understand? Good ones as well. That's just the tip of the iceberg, that when we get some decent concentration and start to go more deep into our mind in a very coherent way, we're going to hear these we know there are thousands of thoughts underneath it all the time, don't we? But we don't recognize them, we don't acknowledge them. So it's only when they come violent to the surface, dressed up with emotion, that we notice we have these. But they all come down to being conceptual stories, way deep down inside. Do you understand my point? What do you mean you think so? Okay, it's not complicated. Listen to me. When we think of a person who's angry, we see a person shouting and yelling and shaking. So it's fairly easy to deduce that they're angry, isn't it? But then let's just say they write that. Let's say you transcribe what they're saying. You tape record them, well, MP3 them, and then you write it all down. And let's say another person in this room doesn't shout much, but they've got lots of angry thoughts, and they write their thoughts down. And you have two pieces of paper, right? Now, what's written on a piece of paper? Words, aren't they? And what are words? Thoughts, aren't they? You don't hear any shouting, do you? And maybe the person who doesn't shout, if you read their words, you go, my God, that guy's really insane. Are you hearing my point? So are they not thoughts? Are they not thoughts that we're describing here? Can you hear my point?
Yes.
Not just think so now, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
But the shouting is what throws us. The shouting is just the expression of thoughts and the feeling of the body, isn't it? But it's thoughts, isn't it?
It's also the happiness and the joy.
The same there, it's all thoughts too. They're all thoughts as well, darling.
Yes. So how to manage my anger is to...
How to do what?
If I get angry, I
Yeah.
want to work with my anger.
Okay, yeah, but you don't wait. Like I said yesterday, and this is a really important point. Our trouble is because we don't have skills in general in our culture to observe our thoughts before they become emotions, then we only notice them when the Vesuvius is about to explode. In other words, we only notice that our wheels are falling off when you're driving at 120 kilometres an hour on the freeway. A bit late, baby. So this is what we have to learn. The learning, okay, we've got to start somewhere. So we don't even notice we're angry until you're shouting. At least now you notice it and you make a few decisions afterwards. You're going to start looking at your mind before you get to the shouting. This is the hard part. But this is what's possible.
And that's very interesting.
It is interesting.
And exciting.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well done, girl. Congratulations. Because it's obvious, if you're only going at 5 miles an hour, it's easy to deal with your wheels falling off. But if you're going 100 miles an hour, impossible. The same with all the rage. But we just don't notice it until it's too late. And then we go to the therapist. And that's why we kill each other or ourselves. And we just don't think... I mean, in other words, the time to go to the therapist is when you just get annoyed. But people laugh at you, you just go to the... Are you seeing my point? Annoyance is a mild level of anger. But we wait till you're raging angry. That's just plain stupid. It's like going to the... It's like not having any mechanics to help your car except only when you crash. That's how foolish we are, even in our view of therapy in the West. We don't have maintenance. We should go to the therapist and get skills and techniques before we go crazy. But we wait till we go crazy. It's very, very foolish, really. And that's why, let's say Martin and I are happy and we're all in love and everything's perfect, and someone says you should learn to meditate, we laugh at them. Oh, but why should we? We're happy. And that's why one of our misconceptions about meditation, we assume it's an alternative to a pill. That's our view, very deep. That's just plain stupidity. We should be brought up with techniques to learn to know our mind. I mean, we learn to know everything else. We learn to play the piano, to do mathematics. We don't wait until you don't wait until don't wait until the tree is growing in your house before you learn botany. I mean, it's just common sense. We learn nutrition, botany, everything. We're geniuses, but we don't learn to know about our mind. It's a practical point, And then it's not difficult to change. If you're just getting annoyed with Martin, and you're hearing your own talking, shut up, Robina, give it a break. You argue with it, you calm down, and it's like, hi, darling, how are you? Problem gone. But if you wait till you're vomiting out the mouth, so much drama, so much suffering, so much harder to fix. Do you understand? That's really the job of being a Buddhist. Okay. What else, people? Mm-hmm.
I have a question regarding attachment that
Yes.
is starting in childhood.
Yes, it just started countless lives ago, Buddha says.
Right. So would you say that then is conceptual as well? Or the child is not able to really
Okay, it's
figure
no,
out what
okay.
it
That's a
is?
good. Thank you. Or animals, the same. Buddhist psychology refers to all beings. Okay, the monkeys, the ants, the dogs, the snakes, the humans. So there's two things. One is programming and habit. Do you understand? So at the moment, when I was a little girl, my mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. Because we can deduce from the Buddhist perspective, I'm programmed with my own attachment, which wants what I want every second, and the second I didn't get what I wanted, anger would explode. So that's the proof that I'd practiced it before, if you think about it, very simple. So you can look at, so then you always think of this particular monkey or ape or one or other of those kinds of beings, who hops, when he first gets born out of his mummy's womb, he turns around and he has sex with her. Then he's with his sister, and his auntie, and his uncle, and his grandpa, and his grandma, and his strangers, and his friends. Clearly, he's programmed with sexual attachment. So really, karma, one way of talking about karma, is programming. So obviously, if you see somebody, like you look on YouTube now, these little children playing bark. I mean, you can't believe your eyes, you know. They must have practiced before. Some little children kill and torture. They must have practiced it before. So if we're good at something called anger or love or kindness, we must have practiced it before. But the point is, the habit is there that's spontaneous. You're not saying, I will get angry, but it's when you look into your mind and unpack the emotions and go beyond the emotion, you're going to hear that these thoughts raging on underneath all the time, and they go deep as well. They're deeply habitual. So it's an unpacking from gross level to more subtle, to more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. These habitual conceptual stories that we are programmed with. We come fully programmed, Buddha says, from the first second of conception, from our past lives. I mean, this is an interesting point because it shows how deep they are. Do you understand my point? But they all come, once you unpack and unravel them, you get down to hearing how you hear these ancient practice conceptual stories down there.
So first is still to recognize that what happens in the moment now is not necessarily due to blaming the other person, but it's part of my story.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. And the other person is merely the trigger for it. That's right. That's why if we're being sensible and we know our own mind, and you get so angry with that particular person, keep out of their way, you know, until we're more controlled ourselves. Yeah, that's right. The key thing in Buddhist psychology to understand, which is really the view of karma, and we don't really think this when it comes to psychology in our culture, it's very fascinating. We know in our world, if you keep practicing piano, no one's surprised that you're good at it, right? Because we call it learning, don't we? But we don't think of it with emotions that way. Because we have this very kind of complicated explanation of why you're angry. Because he did that, and she did this, and he did that, and he did this, and the weather did that. So we keep thinking we're this innocent victim that I just can't help but get angry. Whereas you're angry for the same reason that you play piano. You must have practiced it. It's very simple, but it's kind of shocking to hear it. Do you understand my point? And when we can hear that, we can own it humbly and realize, you know, I'm fed up with this boring old habit. Do you understand my point? I mean, in the world, we understand why you're good at piano or cooking or anything, but not when it comes to emotions. We have a very different, weird, different explanation of emotions. It's very curious. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What else, people? Nothing? What time is it? What time is it, Martin? Where's the clock? Oh, it's early, isn't it? Or whatever. So go on, yes.
Another question.
Yes, please.
I was thinking about history.
Yes.
And Tibet used to be quite a closed
Yes.
country.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, towards the end of the 50s,
Yes.
a lot of Tibetans fled.
That's right.
And they faced a new audience,
Absolutely.
if you like.
That's right.
Has that meant any changes at all?
Oh, I think it's for Tibetans.
Yeah,
for
and the teachings.
okay,
the
I see
way
what you're
things
saying.
are presented.
Okay, I would say the major change is it's degenerate. It's become very degenerate. I mean, the level we study Buddhism, okay, even when I first went to our monastery, Kopan Monastery, in 1970, whatever it was, doesn't matter, 77 or whatever, I remember the monks at the monastery were studying in the same way that they'd studied in the monasteries 100 years before, 500 years before. It hardly changed. That means they studied 7 days a week and they had 3 days off a year at New Year, at Tibetan New Year. Well, now they have their motorbikes and they have their mobiles and they have weekends off, and they, you know, and you. So in other words, it's degenerate times because it's joining our culture, and it's inevitable, it's natural, and it's going to. I mean, so in one sense, it all has to change because cultures are changed, and so it's going to manifest differently. But in a good way, it's spreading across the world, and look at us, you know, white people and pink people and non-Asian people studying Buddhism. But inevitably, the level we study it at is not the same. I mean, they study for 30 years in those monasteries. They still do. So that most of us in our culture, being Swedes or Australians, won't study. One or two of our friends are in the monastery studying in the same way as the Tibetans. So in one sense, it's fantastic because it's spreading around the world, but it's spreading thin. I'd put it that way. It's spreading thinner. It's sort of inevitable in a way, you know.
So this Lam Rim that we're doing now in this course, if you
It's
do
still
it in the monasteries, that would be 20 years.
well, actually, no. What's interesting is they don't study the Lam Rim in the monasteries. Because what the Lam Rim is taking from all that body of knowledge the essence of the teachings and presenting them in a particular way to make it more experiential in your daily life. That's all it is. But when you study the philosophy, you're studying the text that the Lam Rim is the source of, the source from. You understand? Like the 5 years, you did 5-year basic program, right? So, you know, even you did 5 years, didn't you? Didn't you? Okay. She studied the 5-year, we have a thing called a basic program, which is the same text that they would do in, some of the texts that they'd do for 20 years, we do them in 5 and 7 maybe now, you know? Yeah, 5 or 7. The masters then. Yeah, the other one. So the point is, the Lam Rim is meant to be more experiential. Those points that come from there. So in high school, for example, you learn about the mind, delusions. Now, if you want to find the source in the literature, that's the text on the way the mind works, and it's very vast. But in the Lam Rim, there's only an emphasis on making it about your life. It's a way of making it experiential. That's the point about it. It's very tasty. Otherwise, there is a danger. You can just become intellectual and study for 37 years. And that's why for the Tibetans, or even Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, when he's got out, like, for example, our centre in Italy has been doing it for about 30 years now, the so-called Masters program, which is 7-year study. It's the longest one. The 8th year is a 1-year retreat. Lama Zopa insists on that. And the thing is, we Westerners, we modern people, are very intelligent. We're super educated, you know. We're super educated, super technically brilliant. So there can be a real danger that you forget the experiential part. You just get very clever. So the Lam Rim is to help you make it more grounded, more experiential, more humble, you know, less pride, less arrogance, and the emphasis. All the teachings are coming from the philosophical stuff, but it's the emphasis on experiential. Do you understand? So the really great practitioners, you know, even when Lama Yeshe talked about in his Mahamudra book, this lovely book about meditation on emptiness, he talked about, you know, how it was in the monasteries. They'd go to their classes, they'd go to their debates, then they'd go home to their room, and then they'd go meditate on it. Every day they'd internalize it in meditation, instead of just making it intellectual, you know. And that's really the emphasis, especially in Lam Rim, meditation on it, making it real inside. They talk about getting realizations from listening, getting realizations from contemplating, discussion, and then realizations from actually the taste of it, you know. That's the emphasis in Lam Rim. Someone else?
There's also a lot of debating there.
Absolutely. This is their main tool. Their main tool for really sharpening the mind and getting the knowledge deep in their mind is debate. And that's the one thing that we're missing. We don't have, because the system is so subtle and so sophisticated and so suited to their very concise language. It's very hard to translate it into English, really hard. I know, so all of us, I mean, you guys never did debate, did you? And when I studied, I didn't do debate. But that's their main tool. Without debate, nothing gets real for them. That's on the yard afterwards. Sometimes they debate in their years of study, sometimes they debate for days on end, you know. They debate things, huge part of their learning. And the few Westerners who have done it in the monasteries, they also do that. There's one woman now who's a Geshe. She's the only one, I think, German woman, student of Lama Zopa's, Geshe Wangmo. And there's a couple of Westerners. Now there's a Dutch monk. He's coming to, where's he going to be sent? He's coming here. Oh, he's coming here. Oh, great. Good on you. Very good. Well done. What else, people? Any questions? No? Nothing? Huh? Nothing. Any old thing you like? The weather, football, I don't care. Nothing? Yeah.
You
if I practice bodhicitta and come.
Start again.
If I practice bodhicitta
Yes.
and come into that I am bodhisattva and
Yes.
come into next.
Yes, yes.
In this case, what is it about karma? What is it about suffering? Because we are anyway in our body, we are anyway in this life, which is ground for suffering.
Yes, that's right.
So it means that I choose.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. No, no. Yeah, I understand your point. I understand. It all depends on the level you are. It all depends on your level in the stages of development on the bodhisattva path. But in general, you know, at a certain point, the if you've got bodhicitta, which is pretty amazing, even before you realize emptiness, your bodhicitta is pretty powerful, and your delusion will be very subdued, and you'd be happily being reborn, choosing consciously because of this motivation, life after life, wanting to be reborn. And at a certain point you would get where you wouldn't need to be reborn, but you want to be reborn. You absolutely want to be reborn out of choice. And eventually, as you get really highly realized, and you know the highest level bodhisattvas, and then even a Buddha, you still take a body, but you don't suffer. Not possible. When you're a Buddha, you don't need a body. You're completely beyond needing any bag of bones, you know. But you consciously decide to take rebirth in ordinary bodies, so you can be of benefit to others. But you don't suffer. Not possible. You can't suffer. Delusions have gone. If you're a Buddha, all the delusions are gone. It's not possible. There's not possible for any suffering whatsoever. You have utter control over everything. You can manifest in any bodies you like. You can manifest as dogs and ants and anything, but you don't suffer. Not possible. Absolutely impossible. You're pretending. The Dalai Lama is said to be a Buddha. You know, they all say Dalai Lama's a Buddha. So if he's a Buddha, he's not really a human being. That sounds very weird to us, because a human, by definition, is the fruit of delusions. You're in samsara still. When you've gone to a certain stage of development, you do not need a rebirth. You do not need you don't need bodies. So Dalai Lama, if he is actually a Buddha, they say he has accomplished that. He's choosing to be reborn as looking like a human being, acting like us, sounding like us for our benefit. Did I answer? Okay. Yeah. Someone else? I mean, all this stuff's so abstract for us. It's so weird, isn't it, when you think about it? Which compare with the materialist model, quite different. Go.
Ordination.
The Bhikshuni ordination. Yeah.
Have we seen any effect of this? They go to other countries to get it, but they still just do Tibetan tradition.
I know. I don't know. What Dave was talking about is over the centuries in Tibet, since India, there's different levels of ordination for monks and nuns, males and females, and there's 3 levels of it, and the third level, the highest one, is where you take what they call full ordination. So full ordination for women, it seemed, never got to Tibet. That's what I've heard. Also, did never get to Thailand or Burma. So monks and the nuns in those countries and nuns in Tibet are only novice nuns. So since that time, there's been a big talk, since coming to the West, of women taking full ordination. And so the full ordination is existing in some countries like Vietnam, other countries. So some nuns have gone and taken full ordination as nuns in other traditions, but it's meant to be the same vows. So the Tibetans, I don't know what it's waiting for. These men waffling along, I don't know. It's up to the men, I think. I don't know. I don't know all the details. I don't pay attention. I don't know. Who else? Some questions? Yes.
Hi. Just wondering what your thoughts were on the sudden attainment versus gradual path.
Well, just speaking about it normally, ordinary language. If you're learning piano, at some point you can play it perfectly. At some point you play it beautifully, don't you? Would you agree?
Sure. Not me.
No, but you understand my point. But that's sudden, isn't it? Suddenly, if one day someone sees you and suddenly you play it beautifully. But how could it be sudden? It's only as a result of your past practice. So I would even suggest there's no such thing as sudden. I think it's a misconception. Because it's a result of past practice. It has to be. Is it, I mean, for me that's one, I mean, I don't know, I'm not trying to be sectarian about people who say it. I'm just saying my own, thinking about the logic of it, I can't even think of any body of knowledge that anybody would ever do that comes without practicing. And if we think there's something called spiritual that comes without practice, that's superstition in my opinion. Because it's putting it in another kind of special kettle, another category of something special and unique and unusual. Everything's sudden at some point. At some point you'll be able to play tennis. At some point you'll make the cake. At some point something will hit, the penny will drop and you'll get something. But it's a result of what you've done before. Surely, surely, surely. That's my view. I think probably Tsongkhapa would agree, the tradition we're talking here, but I just think on common sense level. Do you get my point though? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Will that do? That's satisfactory? Thought? Okay, good. Fantastic. Who else? No, I'll say something else. I think there can be a benefit for when we're over-intellectual to let go of expectations and all that kind of thing, and just, I think that can be some benefit. And that type of talk coming in that approach, that's helpful. Just to sort of go, you know, not expecting all the time, that kind of thing, greedily waiting for some experience to come. People talk about being in the zone, you know, when they're running or something. That's the kind of experience that seems to pop out of nowhere. I mean, so I think that can be helpful talk. Just let go of attachment, I think, possibly. But I think in general terms, I can't think of anything we'd ever learn that didn't come from having done it before. And of course, if we take like children who can, I mean, I remember reading some little 7-year-old American girl writing orchestral pieces for 62-piece orchestras. She's 7. So if you don't have the view of reincarnation, that is definitely sudden, isn't it? You can't, there's no logic to it. But if you have the view of reincarnation, she's practiced before, you know. Do you understand my point? There's no other way to explain it. Of course, in the West, we can't explain it. We just can't explain it. What else, people? Any questions? Where? Go, anybody. Please talk. Go, darling. Yes.
Yes, I think about this practice, I think Lamrim, when you try to kill your ego.
Yes.
And you try to noblen and try to all negative energy to kill your diamond of. And it was funny because I listened. Dalai Lama, he told about some practice, and he said that in this practice before, I said that this demon of who it was has disappeared and it was not kind, and he said that now I changed this practice because it's not kind. In the morning I say that I love everybody, and in the evening I say to some or demon or somebody that.
Yeah, so what's your point?
And in this case I thought that how can I change this practice? So
which practice?
To kill my ego demon or something.
I don't know, see, but you're going to have to, can you give me a bit more context? What type of practice are you talking about? I don't understand.
Now I'm trying to kill my ego.
Are you?
Right to, in English, ego.
What do you mean you're trying to kill your ego?
Ego.
I understand, but why are you trying to, what do you mean you're trying to kill your ego? What do you mean by that? Is there a certain practice
in my practice,
in your day-to-day life?
When I practice the Islam Rim, I have some technique.
And you may have your own technique.
Not my own technique.
What do you mean?
From the teacher.
I don't understand.
And in this,
well, can you explain it, please, to me?
I do some practice so that I take everything bad from everybody around all sense of being, and I try to keep it. And with this negativity, I kill my ego.
So you mean Tonglen?
Demon. Yes.
You mean you're doing Tonglen?
Yes, but at the same time, at the end, I kill my ego.
Okay, so
demon.
what's the question?
I don't want to kill. I don't feel that it's
yeah, but
if I.
Oh, darling, but I think you're now being a. Dalai Lama meant something completely different. In India, when he did the initiation, as you might know, when you first do an initiation, and the Lama who's doing it will then make an offering to the interfering spirits to make them go away. And he said, I don't want to do that. I love all sentient beings. So that's unusual for the Tibetans. That's he's talking about real people there. But you're just using an analogy of killing your ego. That's a wonderful thing to kill. Don't worry about it.
It's the same.
It's not the same.
My mind,
It's
mind negative.
But that's wonderful. That's a good thing. You want to kill your ego. It's a lovely dramatic phrase. It's very nice. Has great meaning.
I want electricity. I don't want healing. I don't
What-
feel
what?
comfortable with
What?
this technique.
Well, then stop.
But maybe you can find some alternative, some other way.
But darling, what? But sweetheart, wait. Listen, you don't have to use those. I've never used those words in my whole life. You just have to recognize your mind, recognize the jealousy, recognize the hurt, recognize the anxiety, recognize your attachment. And then the virtuous part of yourself, your kindness and your intelligence, says, oh, give it a break, you know, Robina, shut up, go away. You don't have to use the word kill. You don't have to use that word. You don't have to use that word literally like that. You don't have to. Just use a different method. In the end, you're working on your mind. You're being your own therapist. You're trying to grow your virtues and lessen your delusions. That's the real job. But you're describing some Tibetan way they talk. They're very medieval, you know. So don't say it. Just change the way you think. You're trying to work on your mind, right?
Yes.
You're trying to be less deluded
Yes.
and more virtuous.
Yes.
Well, why can't you speak like that instead of saying kill?
Yes, but every meditation when I used to work with my teacher.
Well, if he tells you to do it and she tells you to do it and you like it, then do it. I mean, I don't understand your dilemma. You're the boss here. You're the boss.
Any practice which I don't like, I can change.
If you think that,
Speaking just.
but you're the boss. You're the one who becomes Buddha. You're the one who. You're the one who.
Somebody
What?
this practice. Somebody.
But darling, you don't have to do every practice. There's a million practices.
No, but I followed some. Just like that. I thought it maybe just this practice I can change. So it's better for me.
If there's a particular practice that's written down by somebody who got it from his teacher, who got it from his teacher, and there's a little technique, then you just leave it there and say, thank you very much, but I'm going to close the book on that and I'll do something else. Don't change it. Just leave it there. You're the boss. You are allowed to work. You're the one who must choose what works for your mind. If you have a commitment to do certain practices, that's different. Do you understand? Are you sure we're communicating?
I hope so.
You're understanding what?
I think that I am.
Good. Then I'm happy. That's enough. Good. Go for it. So you people want to go home. There's nothing else to say. I'm not trying to force you to talk. I should have spoken slower and said more things. I didn't. I ran out of time. Yes, darling. Talk.
I was just thinking about that is, maybe not killing, but it's a reduction of the ego, the sense of the ego. When you do this, it's not, it's kind of, it's a compassion, practicing compassion through, like, in itself, it maybe reduces the part of that kind of ego that is the I guess the negative side of the ego. It's not necessarily. It's a way to lessen your negative emotions by doing this practice. It maybe the teacher who told you that expressed it as a way to kill your ego, but I think maybe it's just a way to reduce the kind of the clinging to that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on, darling. What's your question?
I was talking to some youngsters, teenagers, the other day, and these days they have many options and they have anxiety of which path to choose.
Yeah, that's right.
And they want to do something good. Do you have any advice for these people, for these teenagers these days, on choices?
Kind of a big question. It's like saying, how long is a piece of string?
Yeah.
What do you tell them? How do you help them? What's your job? How come you're talking to teenagers?
Well, I work in graphic design.
Okay.
And we just had a group of young people there at work.
Asking about it.
Yeah.
So what conversation came up?
I was just interested in hearing what it's like to be a teenager these days. And I hear a lot of anxiety.
Anxiety. How is it expressed?
About making.
How do they express it?
About making choices. On school, on career, on university.
Isn't that how we were?
Sorry?
Isn't that how we were when you were teenagers? Think it's different?
Maybe I've forgotten.
I think we forget.
But I think I sort of feel a bit more pressure. I hear more pressure these days.
Really? You know, helping anybody, first of all, you can't help anybody if you don't know your own mind. And if you do know your own, you know that process. Let's say you identify with what they're talking about and you have empathy, then just giving courage, giving enthusiasm, praising them. This is the most miraculous way to help anybody. Just praise the person, love them, encourage them. Because when you've got anxiety, you don't have confidence in yourself, do you? Would you agree with that? So by someone else saying wonderful words to you, oh, you're wonderful, you're so intelligent, I would really trust your wisdom, you'll make the right decision. You're wonderful, look at your wonderful qualities. It's like nectar to hear words like that. That's how you help people. In the most broad way, be loving and kind and optimistic and praise, because nobody ever praises themselves. Because what you're doing is giving them courage. Go, oh, wow, I can make the decision.
Yeah.
You're allaying their anxiety. You know? We're not trying to answer their questions. We often think we have to solve it for them. No. You give that person courage to solve their own problem. That's the real way to help people.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day.
Yes.
There, the difference of being a helper and a coach.
Yeah, exactly. And that you can only do that if you feel confident. And you know the process they're going through. There's no way, otherwise you'll get anxious too. You understand?
Yeah, I'm thinking that a lot of compassion there.
That's right.
Could help.
But compassion, not just empathy, but confidence, praise, lifting them up, you know? You can do it. You're amazing. You've got so many qualities. Well, you know, just praising a person. Sincerely. I think that's powerful. All you can do, I mean, in that moment, that's what you can do.
Yeah, and what you were talking about yesterday as well, people wanting to be seen.
When you know that, and you feed it in the best way, feed into that one in the best way, yeah, really see the person, hear the person, acknowledge the person. It's so beneficial, so powerful. Absolutely. But the key one is if you can't do it yourself, forget it. You understand?
Yeah.
Well, we don't need to keep talking. We can always go home. What time do you normally finish class, Kaiser? Yeah, you can if you want to. We'll have a cup of tea and a biscuit or something. Yeah? Okay, so we end early. Thank you, everybody. You're very kind. Keep moving. Never give up. Never give up. That's something too. Optimism. So I'm saying to you now, never give up, you guys. No matter how neurotic you are, no matter how miserable you are, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Never give up. Never give up. Keep moving, one step at a time. Keep trusting your own wisdom, too, with your practice and things as well. You know? Do you understand?
Sorry.
That means may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. Okay, that's it.
I was going to suggest some advertising.
Oh yeah, my advertising, my commercials.
We can do. You do some.
You got
I do
commercials.
some.
I got 3 commercials. Now they're down there. There's postcards. I lead these pilgrimages every year since 2001 that raises money for the prison project. It's an amazing experience. India and Nepal every October. Please get the postcard. The one with the elephant. The one with the ship is a cruise, and it says 2010, but the one's a mistake. It's 2020. Look on the back and you'll see the right date. That's in March 2020, and it's a complete cruise around Australia in one of those big fancy ships, and it raises money for Lama Zopa's cave up in the mountains, and I'm very excited about that. That's in March 2020, the cruise one, and the third one is a CD. I mean, there's a friend of me. We made a CD. It's like Gregorian chanting, but it's Tibetan. There she goes. She's holding them. That's my commercials. Grab a postcard. Yeah, there you go. A cruise or a pilgrimage to India. If you want luxury, come on the cruise. They both raise money for different things. And then the DVD is whatever you want. Okay, go on.
And my commercial would be, first of all, that Yeshinobu, the center, is a non-profit organization. And this can only happen through the help of our members. So if you want, you can always become a member of the non-profit organization or a member of the center, then you can get all these great deals on the courses we offer and all that. And if Anne-Marie, can you hold up our program? It should be down there. So when you go, you could you could grab a bunch of our programs and then you hand them out at strategic places like maybe your workplace. That's all our visiting teachers and our weekly programs. Our weekly classes start next week, so check out the program, check out the website, and please do come out also and just hang. It's wonderful when people come and just hang out, read a book, and have a cup of coffee. Yeah, we'll have a better coffee machine. You can still get coffee. And if you want to stay for a while, have a cup of coffee, you're welcome. Look at the bookshop and so on. Yeah, that was my part. Thank you.